Welcome to my YouTube channel. To all of you, my wonderful subscribers, thank you guys very much for your support. And if you are dropping by for the first time, please like this video, hit the subscribe button, strike the bell notification. That way you are going to be the first to know whenever I create new content. Thank you very much as you do so. So in this video, we are going to be talking about information barrier policies. We are going to introduce them. We'll see exactly what information barrier policies are. We'll look at specific use cases for information barrier policies in Microsoft Teams, in Exchange Online, in SharePoint and OneDrive. We'll now go ahead to see how information barriers work. We'll look at some of the prerequisites that we need to have in place to be able to use information barrier policies. We'll look at the licenses and the permissions. And then in the second part of the video, we'll get into the console and actually create these policies. And we have a feel of exactly what these policies are. So it promises to be a very, very insightful session. So please stay with us to the end of the video. I'm sure you will definitely learn something by the end of this video. Thank you very much as you do so. All right, in this video, we are going to be discussing how to use information barriers in Microsoft Purview. We're going to see how to create and enforce policies that prevent unauthorized access and sharing of sensitive data. So let us get started. Now, that's our agenda there. We're going to be introducing the concepts. We'll define what information barriers are. We'll see how these barriers work. We are going to be looking at specific use cases of information barriers with Microsoft Teams, with Exchange Online, and then with SharePoint and OneDrive. We'll then look at how to use information barriers in Microsoft Purview. What are the requirements for information barriers? What are the licensing and subscriptions? What kinds of roles and permissions do we need to have to be able to use them? And then we're going to conclude. So let's begin. Now, we're going to be seeing here how we can create policies that's going to be preventing unauthorized access. We're going to see how to enforce policies that's going to be preventing the sharing of sensitive data. So, what are information barriers? Well, information barriers are a feature of Microsoft Purview, allowing us to define and apply policies restricting the communication and collaboration between different groups of users within our organizations. For example, we can use information barriers to prevent conflicts of interest, insider trading, or data leakage between different departments, different teams, or different projects. And they can help us to comply with different kinds of regulations and standards, such as the GDPR or the General Data Protection Regulation, or the HIPAA, which is the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, just to mention a few. Now, these regulations require us to protect the privacy and confidentiality of our data and of our customers. And information barriers can help us to enhance the security and the governance of our data assets. They'll be doing that by reducing the risk of unauthorized access, sharing, or misuse of sensitive information. So, how do they work? Well, they work by creating segments of users based on certain attributes. These attributes could be departments, roles, projects, or location. Then we can define policies specifying which segments can or cannot communicate or collaborate with each other, and what actions are blocked or allowed between them. For example, we can create a policy preventing users from the finance segment from accessing or sharing data with users from the marketing segment, for example. And these policies are enforced across various Microsoft 365 applications and services like Teams, like SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange. What this means is that users that are subject to these policies will not be able to chat, to call, to email, or share files with users from segments that are restricted by the policies. And these barriers will also apply to Microsoft Purview. And Microsoft Purview, by the way, is a unified data governance service helping us to discover, to catalog, and manage our data assets across our entire organization. So within Microsoft Teams, information barriers will help us control and monitor communication and collaboration between users. Now, Teams being a platform that allows users to chat, to call, to meet, and share files with each other, whether the users are internal to our organization or external. And it also allows users to create and join different teams and channels where they can collaborate on projects, on topics, or on tasks. However, some of these scenarios can pose a risk of exposing or leaking sensitive data, especially if the users belong to different segments that should not communicate or collaborate with each other. For example, if we have a team that works on a confidential project, we may not want them to chat or share files with users from another team that works on a competing project, for example. Now, in a similar way, if we have a team that handles personal data of our customers, we may not want them to communicate or collaborate with external users or partners. Now, for us to prevent this risk, we can use information barriers to define and apply policies that will be restricting the communication and the collaboration between users in Microsoft Teams. For example, within the financial services sector, we can use information barriers to prevent insider trading. We'll be doing that by restricting communication between different departments that handle sensitive information. If we are in a legal setting, information barriers will ensure that that confidential client information remains within the designated legal team. And within educational institutions, we could also use information barriers to protect student privacy across different schools, while within government agencies, we can use them to limit information flow between departments that may be safeguarding things like, of course, like national security. So, by using information barriers in Teams, we can ensure that our users only communicate and collaborate with the appropriate people, and that our sensitive data is governed and protected according to the appropriate policies. Within Exchange Online, of course, we can also use information barriers where they are going to be helping us to control and monitor email communication between users in Exchange. Now, Exchange Online is a cloud-based email service allowing users to send and receive emails, as well as to manage their calendars, their contacts, and their tasks. However, email communication could also pose a risk of exposing or leaking sensitive data, especially if those users are within specific parts of our organization and we do not want them to communicate with each other. For example, we could ensure that finance personnel that are working on confidential company information do not communicate or share files with certain groups within the organization, or that a research team communicates only with the product development team, for example. Now, within these scenarios, of course, we will be defining information barrier policies that's going to be enforcing some of these restrictions that we've just talked about. Within SharePoint and OneDrive, of course, we could also use information barrier policies to help control and monitor file sharing and collaboration between users in SharePoint and OneDrive. SharePoint and OneDrive are cloud-based services that allows users to store, to share, and collaborate on files and documents, both internally and externally. Now, information barriers in SharePoint and OneDrive are very important components that we can use to prevent unauthorized communication and collaboration. And they are particularly useful in industries that are highly regulated or within organizations that have strict compliance requirements. For example, in a financial institution, we can define information barrier policies to restrict the sharing of sensitive data between different departments, such as investment and retail banking, to avoid conflicts of interest and to maintain regulatory compliance. Also, within the legal firms, barriers can ensure that cases handled by different teams remain confidential, preventing any accidental data leaks that could compromise the privacy of the client or the firm's integrity. Now, similarly, within government or public sector entities, can use information barriers to segment information between various departments, ensuring that sensitive information does not get shared inappropriately. So we will be setting up information barrier modes like open, owner moderated, explicit, and mixed. And then, of course, SharePoint and OneDrive administrators can then finally control access to documents and sites. And of course, they'll be tailoring collaboration to meet the organization's specific needs and regulatory demands. So, how do we use information barriers in Microsoft Purview? For us to use information barriers in Purview, there are specific steps we've got to follow. The first step is we need to create segments of users based on the attributes that we want to use to separate them. We can use Entra ID attributes such as departments, roles, or location, or even custom attributes that we can define within Entra ID. Now, after we've created segments, we want to now go ahead and define policies or create policies that define the rules and the restrictions between the segments. We can use information barrier commandlets in PowerShell to be able to create, update, or delete these policies. And then we want to apply the policies to our organization using the appropriate commandlets, such as the start information barrier policy application commandlet to start the process of applying the policies to our users and data assets. And we also want to monitor and audit the policies to see the effects that they have. In this situation, we could use the get information barrier policy report commandlet that's going to be generating a report showing the status and the results of the policies. And then we can use the Purview data catalog to view the information barriers that apply to our data assets and their classifications. So, what are the requirements for using information barriers? Now, to use information barriers in Microsoft Purview, we've got some prerequisites that we have to meet. First, our organization needs to have the appropriate Microsoft 365 subscription, such as the E5, A5, or G5 subscriptions, which will include compliance capabilities. Now, in addition to that, of course, there are specific roles that are required to be able to manage information barrier policies. So we would require to have at least one of those roles. For example, we may be required to have the Microsoft 365 Global Admin role or the Office 365 Global Admin role. We may also be required to have the compliance admin or the information barrier compliance management roles. Now, these roles ensure that only authorized personnel can enforce and configure information barrier policies. It's also important to note that information barrier supports two-way communication restriction. What that means is that they can prevent specific groups from interacting with each other to maintain compliance and to avoid conflicts of interest. So, in conclusion, information barriers we see can be a very useful tool that can help us protect and govern our data assets in Microsoft Purview and other Microsoft 365 applications and services. And by using information barriers, we can create and enforce policies preventing the unauthorized access and sharing of sensitive data between different groups of users within our organization. And they can help us comply with various regulations and standards. Of course, they could also enhance the security and the governance of our data assets. So we're going to be moving on to the console right now, where we are going to be seeing how to create and how to apply and test these information barrier policies in Microsoft Purview. It promises to be a very, very engaging session. So please stay with us until the end of the video. Thank you very much as you do so. So we are in Purview and we want to begin the process of configuring information barrier policies. But of course, there are a few concepts I just want to iron out in addition to what we've already mentioned in the slide. Now, one of it is user account attributes. Now, user account attributes are basically defined in Microsoft Entra ID. or we could also define them in some cases in Exchange Online. Now, user attributes includes things like job titles, departments, locations, the name of the team, and we want to see how or where we can define them. So I'll go to users, and then I'll select all users here. And just to show you while it loads, I'll just pick on any user. I'll go to the user, and we go to the properties here. I can just go ahead and see edit properties, and it allows us, we can see all kinds of attributes. For example, if I come to job department, job information, I can come in and key in an attribute here by such as department. So these are some of the details that we'll use to assign users or groups to segments with any of the attributes that we want to define here in Active Directory. So that's the first thing we want to be mindful of. Now, another thing we want to talk about are segments. Basically, segments are sets of group or users that we will be defining in Purview, or we could also define them within PowerShell that is going to be using selected groups or user account attributes. Now, the next thing we want to also just define here are the information barrier policies themselves. Now, these policies will be determining the limits of communication or communication restrictions. Now, when we define these policies, I will be choosing from two kinds of policies. We have first the block policies, which will be preventing one segment from communicating with another segment. And then we also have the allow policies. Of course, from the name, is going to be allowing one segment to communicate with only certain other segments as well. So these are just some of the things that we want to go ahead and just iron out in addition to what we have already done. Now, also, we want to go and ensure that directory search is turned on. That is very, 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 very important. We want to go ahead and turn on directory search. So to do that, we will be going to the Teams admin. So I have Teams admin here already open. So I'll go to Teams admin. Now within Teams admin, I want to go ahead and go to Teams, and then I want to go to Teams settings. So I'll go to settings. So I'm now in Teams settings. Then I want to scroll down all the way down to, I think, where we have search by name. So scroll down here, and that's it here. I want to ensure that search by name is turned on. And once I turn it on, I want to go ahead and click on save to save this setting. Now, take note that it will take some time for this change to take effect. That's very, very important. It could take, in some cases, up to 24 hours, depending on the size of your organization, for this to take effect. So those are some of the things that you want to be mindful of. So having met the prerequisites, we want to move on to some other steps as well. All right, so we want to define the segments. We are going to be defining the segments in the Purview portal. So I'll go ahead and begin the process of defining the segments. I'm signed in with the appropriate account, of course. Don't forget the roles and the permissions you would require to be able to do this. So I want to scroll all the way down, and I want to go to information barriers. That's it here. I'll just expand it, and then I'll click on segments. So I'll go ahead and click on segments, and we can see here that our segment area is blank because we've not defined any. So we'll go ahead and click on new segments. Now take note about the name. once you create a name, you will not be able to change it. So you've got to choose your names wisely and appropriately. So I want to create two segments. I want to call one marketing, and then I want to call the other legal. So let's start with the legal segment. So I'll call it legal, and then I'll click on next. And that takes me to adding a user filter group. So I'll go ahead and click on add. And these are now the attributes the attributes we talked about. So I want to specify department as my attribute, and I'll say department equals legal. Now note that there are other options as well. We also have not equals there. Okay, so I'll go ahead. If I'm happy with what I've done, I want to go ahead, and we could also add additional attributes if we wanted to. They say it follows the same process. So, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just go ahead and click on next. And on the summary page, you still have the option to edit the name and edit the user group filter. And if you're happy with what you've done, you want to go ahead and click on submit, and it goes ahead to submit everything that you have done. So the segment is created, and I can go ahead and click on done. And if I come and refresh now, we can see we have a segment here called legal. It tells you the last person that modified it, and of course it gives you the last modification date. So I want to go ahead and click on new segment to create another segment. This time I want to call it marketing. Okay, I'll click on next. I'll go ahead and do the same thing. And then of course I'll hit on submit. And then of course I'll click on done. So we have defined our segments. The next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create policies. This time we are still going to be using the portal to create the information barrier policies. We can see the two segments we created. One is called marketing, and of course the other one is called legal. Like I said before, once you give your policy a name, you will not be able to change the name. To be able to make modifications in terms of the name, you may have to delete the policy and then recreate it again for that to work. So you have to take note of that. Now, so we want to go ahead and create policies. In this case, we are using the portal. So we are in the Microsoft Purview portal. We are still within the information barriers card. We've selected segments, but this time around, I want to go ahead and click on policies to begin to create policies. We see again here that we do not currently have any policy, and that's because we've not created one. So we're going to be creating a policy right away. So I'll go ahead and click on create policy, and I want to give my policy a name. I'll call my policy block communication between legal and marketing. I like to give things like these very descriptive names so that it's self-documenting. Once you see it, you know exactly what it's going to do. So I'll go ahead and hit on next. And this is the point where I want to choose the segment. So I want to add and assign segment detail. I'll go ahead and click on choose. And we can see here that the segments we created comes up. Take note here that you can only select one segment in this case. So even when you have radio check boxes, it's only one segment you can create. So I'm going to select just one, legal. I'll go ahead and click on add. And then I want to go ahead and click on next. And you want to configure communication and collaboration details. In this case, you have either the allowed or the blocked. Now, the allowed and the block status for segments can't be changed also after you've created a policy. For you to change the status after you create the policy, you must delete the policy and then create a new one. So I'll go ahead and click on blocked because that's what I want to do. I don't want communication between those two segments. So I have selected that I want that segment blocked. It also tells us here that communication over Teams and collaboration on SharePoint and OneDrive will be restricted based on this policy. That's exactly what I want. So I want to select allowed block segments for the policy. I want to go ahead and again, I selected legal the first time. So I want to go ahead and now select marketing this time. And then I go ahead and click on add. Okay, so we see that the segment here now is chosen. And then I click on next again. This is the point where you can set your policy to an active status. Okay, so of course I'm going to, I think I will leave this for now, and okay, I can just turn it on. I can turn the policy on. I'll just go ahead and ensure that I toggle this switch to on, and then I want to go ahead and click on next. And this is the point where it gives me a summary of my policy, giving me the name, the assigned segments, the blocked segments, and the policy status. Now, note here that you have options to edit uh, any of this, but take note that there are things you will not be able to edit once you click on submit. For example, you won't be able to edit the name again, and you will not be able to, of course, edit the policy status once you have clicked on submit. So I'll go ahead and hit on submit, and it's submitting my policy. And of course, before long, my policy is going to be ready. And once it's ready, of course, it tells me my policy is created. And then, of course, I'll go ahead and click on done. So clicking on done here, if I come and refresh, we can see that we have the policy available to be applied. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next aspect of the video. Okay, so we have defined a policy between the legal segment and the marketing segment where communication is blocked from the legal segment to the marketing segment. Now we need to, for policy symmetry, we need to go ahead and create another policy that does the same thing, but this time around in the opposite direction. So we are going to be creating a policy that's going to be blocking communication between marketing and legal to be able to have policy symmetry. So I'll go ahead and click on create policy. So this time around, I'll say block communication between marketing and legal. So I'll go ahead and hit on next. I'll choose a segment. This time around, I'm going to choose marketing first. Then I'll click on next. And I'll specify an action which is still blocked. And then I'll choose the segment now. And the segment this time is going to be legal. And then I'll go ahead and click on next. I want to turn the policy on again like I did before. And then I'll click on next. And of course, I'll go ahead and click on submit to submit the second policy. So the policy is created. I'll go ahead and click on done. And we can see that we have two policies now. So now that there is a symmetry between the policies, I can now go on to apply the policy. So to apply the policy, I'll go to policy application. And I'll just go ahead. You might not see any effect here immediately. Sometimes it can take up to 30 minutes for us to see the effect. So I'll just go ahead and click on apply all policies. And that is all there is to it. So it's been over 30 minutes since we applied our policy. We want to go and check the status of our policy application. So I'm still in a Purview portal. I want to go to information barriers. That's it there. And of course, we created two segments, and we also created two policies, which we can see here. Now, what we want to check now is we want to see the status of our policy application. I'm going to click on policy application. And we can see here that we see the creation time of our policy. We see when we started the policy application, it started exactly by 12:27. And we see it took some time. It took uh, almost 30 minutes for it to be complete, and we can see the status as completed. We can see that our progress is 100%. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope all through what we've been discussing, you've learned something about information barriers. You are able to create a policy, apply the policy, create segments, and all of that. So thank you very much for your time, and see you in the next video.